Hi, I'm Caleb, and my mother left me to die in the freezing woods abandoned like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Imagine being cast off by the one person meant to protect you. But here's the twist. Someone else was watching, and what they saw sparked a chain of events that would unravel years of hidden cruelty, lies, and betrayals I never saw coming. It was a bone-chilling January evening, the kind that carves cold into your bones and leaves your breath hanging in the air like fragile ghosts. I sat in the front seat of my mother's old Subaru, wrapped in a threadbare hoodie, my fingers tucked under my legs for warmth. She hadn't bothered with the heater, and I'd long since stopped asking for that kind of comfort. Her hands clutched the steering wheel, knuckles pale, jaw clenched tight, eyes fixed dead ahead. I watched her in the dim gray light, her profile sharp and unyielding, like she was biting back a scream she'd never let herself release. "Where are we going?" I tried to sound casual, like I hadn't already been piecing together every cold glance and sharp word for months, like I wasn't bracing for the worst. She flicked her eyes toward me, lips set in a tight line. "You'll see," she replied, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "Trust me." Two words that hit harder than the icy wind rattling the car windows. We passed the last flicker of neon from the gas station on the edge of town. The radio crackled and died as the trees closed in around us, their twisted branches leaning over the road like a warning. I felt my chest tighten. I should have recognized this for what it was, not a road trip but a death march. She jerked the wheel, turning sharply onto a narrow dirt path flanked by skeletal trees. No signs, no lights, just the creeping darkness swallowing us whole. She slammed the brakes, the sudden jolt snapping my head forward. Before I could even fully process it, she was out of the car, boots crunching against the frozen ground. My door yanked open. Her hand clamped around my arm, her grip bruising. "Mom, what are you?" Before I could finish, she hauled me out, my legs tangling beneath me. I hit the cold ground hard, my knees buckling on impact. Pain shot up my right side, sharp and immediate. I tried to push myself up, but my limbs felt disconnected, foreign, like I was moving underwater. "Stop making everything about you," she hissed, her breath a foggy plume in the cold air. She tossed a worn duffel bag beside me, the sound of metal clinking against plastic echoing in the silence. What is this?" My throat felt tight, my voice small against the encroaching dark. She didn't answer. She just straightened, smoothed the front of her jacket, and turned back to the car. The brake lights blinked once, twice, like the final beats of a dying heart. And then the engine growled back to life. I watched, half lying, half kneeling, in the mud and brittle leaves as the taillights vanished into the trees. The rumble of her engine swallowed by the indifferent woods. I was alone. The cold cut through me, slicing through my thin clothes, stealing my breath. I forced myself upright, my right leg already throbbing, the pain spreading up my spine. I fumbled for my pocket, my frozen fingers brushing against the smooth edges of a small, folded piece of paper. I pulled it out, a faded note. Something I'd kept for years, a reminder that once someone had cared. My older sister had written it before she'd left, before she'd cut ties and vanished without a word. "Keep going. Don't let them break you." The words felt heavier now, weighted with the sting of fresh betrayal. I shoved the note back into my pocket and looked around, my breath puffing out in short, desperate gasps. Dark shapes loomed around me. Trees twisted and hunched, like they'd been frozen mid-scream. I needed to move to get up to find shelter. My brain buzzed with half-formed plans, fear gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. Then, through the darkness, I caught a sliver of movement. My heart lurched. A shadow, just a flicker slipping between the trees. I froze, the primal lizard part of my brain screaming at me to stay down, to stay quiet. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished into the underbrush, leaving only the whisper of wind through dead leaves in its wake. I forced myself to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. Pain lanced through my ankle with every step, but I stumbled forward, dragging my duffel behind me. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay here. The darkness seemed to close in tighter with each step, the cold biting deeper until I found it. A small, half-rotted deer stand, barely more than a platform on rickety legs. I collapsed beneath it, curling in on myself as the first flakes of snow began to drift down, settling like ghosts on my skin. I clutched my sister's note tight, my breath coming in shallow, ragged bursts. Somewhere out there, someone had seen what just happened. Someone knew I wasn't alone. Not completely, but for now the woods were my only witness. The wind, my only companion, and the cold, my harshest judge. And this, I realized as I huddled in the dirt and dark, was only the beginning. I woke to the sharp bite of frost creeping through my clothes, seeping into my bones. My legs felt like lead, stiff and unresponsive, every muscle screaming as I tried to sit up. My head throbbed, the dull pulse of a headache building behind my eyes. I could barely feel my fingers as I clutched my sister's note. The paper crumpled and damp in my grasp. The gray dawn light trickled through the skeletal branches above, casting long, jagged shadows that danced like silent phantoms. The deer stand creaked above me, swaying slightly in the wind, its weathered boards whispering secrets to the empty forest. I hadn't slept. Not really. My mind had been caught in a cruel loop, replaying the moment my mother's taillights disappeared into the trees, the sound of the engine fading into nothing. I had to move. The cold was a living thing now, creeping into my joints, stiffening my limbs. I pushed myself up, hissing as my ankle flared with white-hot pain. I leaned against the rough bark of a nearby tree, my breath coming in sharp, foggy bursts, trying to steady myself. I fumbled for the duffel bag my mother had tossed beside me. It felt heavier now, the zippers clinking with every shift. I unzipped it with shaking hands, desperate for anything that might help. Inside, I found a tangle of mismatched items, a half-empty water bottle, a dented flashlight, a thin blanket that smelled faintly of damp earth, and a small tin of crackers. There was no phone, no map, no sign that anyone had ever intended for me to find my way out, just enough to drag out my suffering. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders, hissing as the cold fabric touched my skin. My breaths came shallow and quick, the fear settling into my bones, making my heart pound in my chest like a trapped bird. I forced my mind to focus, to push past the panic. If I stayed here, I would die. That much was clear. I scanned the trees, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. And then I saw it again, the flicker of movement from the night before. My heart stopped, my body freezing as if the cold had finally claimed me. It was just a shadow slipping through the underbrush. But there was a purpose to its movement, a slow, deliberate pace that set my nerves on edge. "Hello!" My voice cracked, a raw, broken whisper. I didn't even recognize it. The figure paused, hidden behind the twisted trunk of a tree about 20 feet away. I saw the edge of a boot, mud-caked and worn, then the faint outline of a shoulder wrapped in dark fabric. Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my heart thudding painfully against my ribs. The figure didn't move, just lingered in the shadows like a predator sizing up its prey. I stumbled backward, my injured ankle buckling beneath me. I hit the ground hard, the pain ripping a strangled cry from my throat. I scrabbled back, my fingers clawing at the frozen earth. My mind a frantic, buzzing mess. The figure stepped into the light. He was tall, his face obscured by a hood pulled low over his brow, shadows clinging to him like a second skin. He took another step forward, the brittle twigs snapping beneath his boots like bones breaking. I tried to push myself farther back, my body trembling with the effort. He stopped just a few feet from me, close enough that I could make out the rough lines of his weather-beaten jacket, the frayed edges of his gloves. He crouched down, his face still hidden, and reached into his coat pocket, my breath hitched, fear clawing at my throat. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small, battered flask. Without a word, he unscrewed the cap and held it out to me. The metallic tang of whiskey hit my nose, sharp and strangely comforting. I hesitated, my fingers hovering just above his outstretched hand. "Take it," he rasped, his voice low and rough, like stones grinding together. "It'll help." I grabbed the flask, my numb fingers clinking against the metal. I took a shaky sip, the liquid burning its way down my throat, flooding my chest with a heat so fierce it almost made me choke. I coughed, the warmth cutting through the icy fog in my mind, grounding me for the first time in hours. He leaned back, his head tilting slightly as he watched me struggle to catch my breath. I tried to meet his eyes, to see past the shadow cast by his hood, but he kept his face angled away, his expression unreadable. Why are you here?" I managed to stammer, the words tumbling out in a breathless rush. He didn't answer, just stood, his silhouette towering over me like a dark, twisted guardian. Without another word, he turned and disappeared back into the trees, his boots crunching through the snow, his figure fading into the morning mist. I stared after him, my mind reeling. He had saved me, or at least he hadn't let me die. But who was he, and why had he been watching me, lurking in the shadows like some forgotten ghost? I clutched the flask to my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My sister's note crackled in my pocket as I shifted, her words echoing in my mind, blending with the stranger's silent footsteps. Keep going. Don't let them break you. I took another shaky breath, feeling the whiskey burn in my veins, and pulled myself to my feet, leaning heavily on a nearby tree. I had to keep moving, keep fighting, because if I didn't, this forest would swallow me whole, and my mother's final betrayal would be complete. The woods had a way of twisting time. Minutes stretched into hours, hours blurred into the gray wash of twilight. My breaths came in tight, shallow bursts as I staggered through the trees, the flask still clutched in one hand, my duffel slung over my shoulder. The stranger's shadow haunted my thoughts. His silent, hooded figure slipping in and out of my memory like smoke. I stumbled over a root, my ankle flaring with fresh pain. I leaned against a thick pine, my head tipping back against the rough bark, the cold pressing in from every direction. My mind felt like it was unraveling. The threads of my sanity pulled taut and fraying. Focus, keep moving. I forced my eyes open, scanning the woods around me. Every tree felt like a pair of eyes, every rustle of leaves a whispered threat. I limped forward, each step a fresh wave of agony, but I refused to stop. I would not die here. The wind picked up, threading its icy fingers through my hair, carrying the faint, bitter scent of smoke. My head snapped up, my pulse quickening. Smoke meant fire, fire meant warmth or danger. I hesitated, torn between the need for heat and the fear of what I might find. After a few agonizing moments, curiosity won. I shifted my weight, gritting my teeth against the flare of pain in my ankle, and followed the thin, curling tendrils of smoke. They led me through a dense thicket, the underbrush snagging at my clothes, branches scratching across my cheeks like ghostly fingers. Then I saw a small, flickering light ahead, barely more than a spark against the encroaching dark. I crept closer, my heartbeat thudding painfully in my ears. I dropped to a crouch behind a twisted fallen tree, my breath misting in front of me as I peered over the splintered trunk. The stranger was there, crouched beside a small fire, his back to me. He moved with a practiced ease, feeding thin branches into the flames, the light casting his shadow long and sharp against the snow. I watched him in silence, my mind a tangled mess of questions and fear. Why hadn't he hurt me? Why had he given me the flask, then vanished without a word? What did he want? I shifted my weight, my knee creaking loudly in the stillness. His head snapped up, the hood tilting slightly as if he'd heard me. My breath hitched. I froze, every muscle locking up as his head turned. The firelight catching the edge of his jaw, a sharp line cutting through the shadows. For a long, breathless moment, neither of us moved. I felt like a deer caught in the headlights, my mind screaming at me to run, but my body refusing to obey. Then slowly he straightened, turning to face me fully. "You're still alive," he said, his voice low and rough, the words crackling like dry leaves. He sounded almost amused. I forced myself to stand, gripping the edge of the tree for balance, my injured ankle trembling beneath my weight. I felt exposed, every nerve sparking with the urge to flee. I didn't have much of a choice, I managed to choke out, my voice wavering. "You just left me there." He tilted his head, his shadow stretching and twisting as the fire crackled between us. He didn't move closer, just watched me, his face still hidden in the shadows. "You're stronger than you think," he said finally, his tone flat, unreadable. Most wouldn't have made it this far. I tightened my grip on the rough bark, the chill seeping into my skin. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to beg for help, but my pride, raw and bleeding, kept my mouth shut. Instead, I took a shaky step forward, the snow crunching beneath my boot. His head tilted slightly, the faintest flicker of movement in the darkness. "Why are you out here?" I asked, my voice firmer now, anger edging out the fear. "Why are you watching me?" He didn't answer, just crouched down again, adding another branch to the fire. The flames crackled, casting long dancing shadows that leaped up the trees around us. I felt my pulse quicken, my skin prickling with the cold, and something else, something sharp and electric. "Are you going to kill me?" I whispered the words, slipping out before I could stop them. My heart pounded, my mind racing through every nightmare I'd ever had, every whispered ghost story told around summer campfires. He paused, his gloved hand hovering over the flames for a moment before he straightened again, his head turning to the side as if listening to something just beyond the firelight. Then he stepped back, his boots crunching through the snow as he moved away from the fire, his shadow stretching across the ground like the reach of a skeletal hand. "Not tonight," he said, his voice so low I almost missed it. "Keep moving, Caleb. The cold isn't the only thing out here that can kill you." And then, he was gone, slipping into the darkness without another word, his footsteps muffled by the thick blanket of snow. I stood there, my breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts, my mind spinning with fear and confusion. I took a shaky step forward, my ankles screaming in protest, and leaned over the fire, my numb fingers stretching toward the heat. I wanted to follow him to demand answers, to tear the hood from his head, and see the face of the man who had been haunting my every step. But I couldn't. My body felt like lead, my mind too scattered to form a coherent plan. So I did the only thing I could. I huddled by the fire, the flames licking at my frozen skin, and whispered to the empty trees, my voice small and cracked. "Who the hell are you?" The wind stirred the branches above, creaking in response, but the darkness offered no answers. I was alone again. The stranger's words echoing in my mind, a cruel reminder that my nightmare had only just begun. The fire crackled, spitting tiny sparks into the dark, whispering branches above. I huddled closer, my breath fogging the air, my fingers tingling as the heat slowly crept back into them. My ankle throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a dull, relentless pulse that reminded me just how vulnerable I was out here. I turned the battered flask over in my hand, the metal cool against my skin despite the fire's warmth. I unscrewed the cap, took a shallow sip, and let the whiskey burn a path down my throat, its warmth seeping into my bones, chasing away the chill for a fleeting moment. I still couldn't shake the stranger's words. "Keep moving, Caleb. The cold isn't the only thing out here that can kill you." The shadows around me felt sharper, now their edges jagged and hungry. I tried to peer into the darkness beyond the firelight, my mind conjuring shapes and figures that danced just beyond the reach of the flames. I had no idea what he meant, but I felt it, the weight of unseen eyes, the sharp prickle of being watched. For a long time, I just sat there, my mind drifting in and out of exhausted half-sleep, the fire crackling beside me, the wind whispering through the pines. My sister's note, still folded in my pocket, felt like a small, fragile lifeline. "Keep going. Don't let them break you." I clutched the fabric of my jeans, my nails digging into my palms, the pain sharp and grounding. I couldn't fall apart. Now I had to keep moving, had to find a way out of this nightmare before the cold or worse claimed me. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet, leaning heavily on the thick branch I'd scavenged earlier as a makeshift crutch. My ankle protested with every shift of my weight, but I forced myself upright, my breath coming in shallow, pained gasps. I gathered what little I had, the thin blanket, the nearly empty flask, my sister's note, and stumbled into the darkness, the fire's warmth already a distant memory. The woods swallowed me whole, the trees closing ranks behind me, their twisted limbs creaking in the wind. I moved slowly, each step a fresh agony, the cold biting into my exposed skin. My mind felt fractured, splintered into a dozen desperate thoughts, each one a sharp, stinging reminder of just how alone I was. And then, just as the first gray hints of dawn crept through the trees, I heard it, a rustling behind me, the sharp crack of a branch snapping beneath a heavy foot. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat, my grip tightening on the rough bark of my crutch. I turned slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to vanish into the underbrush like a hunted animal. But there, through the thin veil of mist that clung to the forest floor, I saw him. The stranger. He stood a few yards away, his hood pulled low over his face, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He didn't move, just watched me, his head tilted slightly like a wolf sizing up wounded prey. "Why are you following me?" I forced the words out, my voice, thin and cracked, echoing weakly between the trees. "What do you want from me?" He took a step forward, the snow crunching beneath his boots, his dark silhouette cutting through the mist like a knife. I felt my pulse quicken, my mind scrambling for a plan, an escape, anything to put distance between us. But then he did something I hadn't expected. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, battered notebook. He held it up, the faded leather cover catching the weak morning light. I squinted, my mind reeling, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I recognized that notebook. It was mine. I felt a cold wave of nausea wash over me, my legs trembling beneath me. I had left that notebook behind years ago, abandoned in my old room when I'd packed up and left my mother's house for the last time. It had been filled with my sketches, my messy, heartfelt scribbles, my quiet, desperate attempts to make sense of a world that felt like it was constantly breaking around me. How did you... I stammered, my voice breaking. He took another step forward, holding the notebook out to me, his gloved fingers wrapped tightly around the worn leather. I felt my mind fracturing further, the edges of my sanity fraying with each passing second. "Read it," he said, his voice rough, almost a growl. "You left it behind." But I didn't. My breath caught my chest tightening as I reached out, my numb fingers brushing against the cool, cracked leather. I felt a jolt of something, fear recognition, anger as my fingertips met the familiar worn edges. I clutched the notebook to my chest, my pulse racing, my mind spinning with 100 unanswered questions. The stranger took a step back, his head tilting slightly as he watched me, his breath fogging in the cold morning air. "Why?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, my fingers trembling against the cracked spine of the notebook. "Why do you have this?" He didn't answer. He just turned, his boots crunching through the snow as he disappeared into the mist, his shadow stretching long and thin across the forest floor. I watched him go, my breath coming in shallow, desperate gasps, my mind a chaotic whirl of fear and confusion. He had my notebook, my sketches, my words, my past. And now I realized with a sick, twisting fear, he had a part of me I hadn't even known I'd left behind. I clutched the notebook tighter, my breath hitching as the first rays of sunlight pierced the gray morning, cutting through the trees like sharp, unforgiving blades. Whatever this stranger wanted, whatever twisted game he was playing, I knew one thing for certain. He had seen me, and he hadn't looked away. The notebook felt heavier in my hand than I remembered, its battered cover, rough against my palm. I flipped it open, my numb fingers struggling to turn the pages, my breath fogging the air in short, desperate bursts. The first few pages were familiar, my messy sketches of twisted trees and sharp-edged mountains, the images I had drawn in moments of quiet desperation trying to capture the chaos in my mind. But as I flipped further, my heart began to race. These weren't just my sketches. Someone had added to them. Dark, jagged lines cut through my careful pencil strokes. Words scrawled in the margins, the ink heavy and black, bleeding through the thin pages. My breath hitched as I recognized the handwriting. Bold, slanted, angry. "You're not alone. They can't break you. Keep walking." I felt my hands tremble, the pages fluttering like trapped wings as I flipped faster, my eyes skimming the words, my mind struggling to keep up. Someone had taken my private thoughts, my hidden fears, and twisted them into a dark, chaotic manifesto. Then I found it, a page near the center. The paper worn and creased, the edges stained with something dark and rust-colored. My own words scrawled in my messy, anxious handwriting jumped out at me. Each line a sharp, painful reminder of the person I had been when I'd filled this notebook. I am not invisible, I matter, even if no one says it. I clenched my jaw, my pulse thundering in my ears. I remembered writing that, remembered the tears that had smudged the ink, the way my hand had shaken as I scrawled the words into the margins of a forgotten sketch. I had been 15, hiding in my room while my mother screamed at my sister over a forgotten phone bill, the sound of breaking glass echoing through the thin walls. I snapped the notebook shut, my breath coming in harsh, ragged gasps, my mind reeling. Whoever this stranger was, he knew me. He had been watching, lurking in the shadows of my life, piecing together my broken thoughts and whispered fears. I clutched the notebook to my chest, my pulse racing, my mind spinning with 100 unanswered questions. I felt exposed, raw, like my skin had been peeled back to reveal the fragile, beating heart beneath. A sharp crack echoed through the trees, the sound of a branch snapping beneath a heavy foot. I whipped around, my eyes darting between the twisted trunks and gnarled roots, my pulse quickening. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice thin and sharp, slicing through the cold air. "Why are you doing this?" The trees swayed in the wind, their skeletal branches creaking like old rusted hinges. I felt my stomach clench, my heart pounding against my ribs. I couldn't see him, but I felt him, the weight of his gaze, the sharp tingling awareness that prickled along my skin. I stumbled backward, my ankles screaming in protest, my breaths coming in shallow, panicked bursts. I had to keep moving, had to put distance between me and whatever haunted these woods. I turned and limped through the snow, my mind a fractured blur of fear and confusion. The notebook felt like a lead weight in my hand, each step a fresh agony, my vision blurring as the cold seeped deeper into my bones. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of a small frozen creek, its surface cracked and splintered, the dark water churning beneath the thin, brittle ice. I dropped to my knees, my breath coming in sharp, desperate gasps, my head spinning. I clutched the notebook tighter, my fingers trembling as I flipped it open again, the pages rustling like dry leaves. I found another note, this one scrawled in the same dark, jagged handwriting, the letters cutting across the page like knife wounds. "You can't go back, keep moving, they're watching." I felt my chest tighten, my pulse thundering in my ears. I whipped my head around, my eyes darting between the trees, the twisted shadows flickering at the edge of my vision. I felt exposed, hunted like a cornered animal. I forced myself to stand, my ankle throbbing, with every step my mind. A chaotic swirl of fear and rage, I stumbled along the creek's edge, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts, the cold biting into my exposed skin. The wind picked up swirling snow around my feet, the sharp, bitter scent of smoke stinging my nose. I squinted into the shadows, my heart leaping into my throat as I caught a flicker of movement. A dark shape slipping between the trees. A shadow too large to be an animal. I felt my blood turn to ice, my fingers tightening around the notebook. I staggered back, my heart racing, my mind screaming at me to run, to flee, to vanish into the darkness. But then I heard it, a low, rumbling chuckle, the sound rolling through the trees like distant thunder. My blood ran cold, my breath catching in my throat as the shadow stepped into the faint gray light. The hooded stranger. He stood on the far side of the creek. His head tilted slightly, his gloved hands hanging at his sides. The notebook still clutched to my chest like a shield. "Keep moving, Caleb," he said, his voice low and rough, cutting through the icy wind. "You're almost there." And then, as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and vanished into the trees. His dark, twisted silhouette slipping into the shadows, leaving me alone with the whispers of the wind and the echo of my own terrified heartbeat. I dropped to my knees, the notebook falling from my numb fingers, its pages fluttering open to reveal more dark, scrawled messages, each one a twisted reflection of my own fears and doubts. "Don't let them break you. You are not invisible. Keep walking." I closed my eyes, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps, the cold seeping into my bones, the darkness pressing in from all sides. And for the first time, I felt the raw, unfiltered fear of being truly, utterly alone. I stumbled through the snow, my mind a tangled mess of fear and confusion. My fingers were numb around the edges of the notebook, the worn leather cold against my skin, the pages fluttering wildly in the icy wind. I had no sense of direction, no clear path forward, just the relentless, pulsing drive to keep moving. The trees around me grew denser, their twisted trunks leaning and branches creaking and swaying, like skeletal fingers reaching for me. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, dark shapes slipping through the underbrush. Always just out of reach, I felt their eyes on me, felt the weight of their stares, the sharp electric awareness prickling along my skin. "You can't go back. Keep moving. They're watching." The words from the notebook echoed in my mind, each one a sharp, stinging reminder of how deeply I had been betrayed, how completely I had been abandoned. My breaths came in short, desperate gasps, my chest tightening with each step, my ankle, a sharp, burning point of agony. I pushed through a dense thicket, the branches scratching across my face, catching in my hair, tearing at my clothes. I stumbled forward, my feet slipping on the icy ground, the cold seeping into my bones, freezing me from the inside out. Then, through the twisted, swaying branches, I saw it, the faint, flickering glow of lights. My heart leaped into my throat, my pulse quickening, my breath catching in my chest. I staggered forward, my mind reeling, my vision blurred with exhaustion and fear. I broke through the trees, my boots crunching through the brittle underbrush, and stumbled out onto a narrow, snow-covered road. The lights were closer now. The faint yellow glow of a small, weathered cabin tucked between the trees, smoke curling from the crooked chimney, the windows flickering with the warm orange light of a crackling fire. I limped toward it, my breath fogging the air in short, desperate bursts, my ankles screaming. With each step, I felt my pulse thundering in my ears, my mind a chaotic swirl of hope and fear, the notebook clutched tight to my chest like a shield. I reached the cabin, my numb fingers scraping against the rough, weathered wood as I leaned against the doorframe, my head spinning. I fumbled for the handle, my frozen fingers struggling to grasp the cold metal, and shoved the door open, the hinges creaking loudly in the silent, snow-covered woods. I stumbled inside, the sudden warmth washing over me, the air thick with the sharp, comforting scent of burning pine. I slammed the door shut behind me, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps, my heart racing. The cabin was small, its walls lined with rough-hewn logs, the floor covered in a thick layer of dust and pine needles. A battered, threadbare couch sat against one wall, its cushions sunken and frayed. A small cast-iron stove crackling in the corner, the flames licking at the sooty glass. I dropped the notebook onto a small wooden table near the door, my knees buckling as I collapsed onto the couch, my head tipping back against the rough, splintered wood. My breaths came in sharp, shallow bursts, my mind reeling, my vision blurred with exhaustion. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the fire washing over me, the crackling of the flames, a comforting, steady rhythm that slowly eased the frantic pounding of my heart. I felt my body begin to relax, my muscles unclenching, my mind drifting into a foggy, exhausted haze. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft. Measured, deliberate crunching through the snow outside the cabin. The sound growing louder, closer. Each step a sharp, biting echo in the silence. My breath caught in my throat, my pulse quickening, my mind snapping back into sharp, panicked focus. I forced myself upright, my head spinning, my fingers clenching around the edge of the couch. I felt my pulse racing, my breath coming in short, desperate gasps. My mind scrambling for a plan, an escape. Anything to put distance between me and whatever was out there. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. The soft creak of the porch boards echoing through the small, cramped cabin. I felt my blood run cold, my muscles locking up my mind. A frantic, buzzing mess of fear and confusion. Then slowly, deliberately, the door creaked open. The hinges groaning in protest. The cold wind whipping through the narrow gap carrying the sharp, bitter scent of smoke and pine. He stepped inside, his boots crunching against the rough wooden floor. His hood pulled low over his face, shadows clinging to him like a second skin. He closed the door behind him, his gloved hands moving with a slow, practiced ease. His head tilting slightly as he looked at me, his breath fogging in the cold, dark air. For a long, breathless moment, neither of us moved, the crackling of the fire. The only sound in the small, cramped space. I felt my pulse thundering in my ears, my fingers digging into the rough fabric of the couch. My mind a chaotic swirl of fear and confusion. He reached up slowly, his gloved fingers curling around the edge of his hood, and pulled it back, his face slipping into the warm, flickering light of the fire. I felt my breath catch, my mind stuttering to a halt, my pulse thundering in my ears. I knew that face. It was my sister. She stepped forward, her eyes sharp, her jaw set, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her shoulders, her breath fogging the air in short, sharp bursts. She reached out her gloved hand, closing around the edge of the notebook on the table, her fingers tightening around the worn, cracked leather. "I told you," she said, her voice low and rough, cutting through the thick, smoky air. "Don't let them break you." I felt my pulse stutter, my mind spinning, my breath catching in my throat as her words sliced through me, sharp and cold as the winter wind. I whispered, my voice trembling, my fingers clenching around the edge of the couch. "I'm still here." She nodded, her eyes sharp, her lips curving into a small, grim smile. "Then keep moving," she said, her voice echoing through the small, cramped cabin. The words cutting through the crackling of the fire, the sharp, bitter wind, the darkness pressing in from all sides. "It's not over yet." And then, without another word, she turned and disappeared back into the cold, dark night. The door creaking shut behind her, the wind howling through the cracks in the walls, the fire crackling in the corner, the shadows stretching long and sharp across the rough, splintered floor. Story 2. Hi there, my name is Odelia. In order for my brother's fiancée to receive her ideal home, my parents felt it was my responsibility to sacrifice my name, my credit, and my future. They lied to the bank and falsified documents. They grinned as if it were nothing. When I told them yet, family members may smile while betraying you, and what more can they do? It didn't seem like a pivotal morning. There was silence. A portion of the Denver sky that was just starting to get pale was visible from my window. From gray to blue. Behind me, the kettle hissed. Unread emails flickered in my inbox. By midday, I would pretend to respond. That type of morning reliability appealed to me. Not very dramatic. I was holding a broken porcelain cup in my hands. "I'm not a morning person," it stated. "I'm hardly human," a joke, present from a coworker with whom I no longer communicate much. That made me grin. My phone then rang. Unknown figure. If it wasn't in my calendar, I wouldn't normally respond. I picked it up, but I hadn't dealt with it before lunch. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was foolishness. "Is this Odelia Hartwell, please?" Something in the tone made me pause. Too reputable to be a fraud. Too calm to be informal. "Yes, this is Liberty. National Bank's Brian White. Regarding the remaining amount on your home loan account that ends in 2048, we are getting in touch with you." I blinked. "My mortgage is non-existent." He did not recoil. 3 years ago, the $800,000 loan was made available, under your social security number and name. A number of notifications have been sent. I didn't ever get a mortgage. I detested. That my voice broke a little. I'm not a property owner. You have the incorrect individual. No, ma'am. We confirmed the SSN and date of birth. Every page has your name on it. For a moment, I stopped breathing. $800,000? I hardly had $800 in my checking account. He inquired whether I wanted a complete digital copy of the loan file sent to me. I was unable to respond. I didn't say goodbye as I hung up, then simply sat with their phone, heart in free fall. At this point, I wasn't even afraid. I felt numb. I opened a drawer in my kitchen later that morning before I found it. I had no idea what I was looking for. A slender flyer, generic trademarking. Greetings from Liberty National, 6 months prior to the date. Unopened. I had thrown it in with the garbage mail. It was a pre-approved envelope with my name put on it. I then opened the plastic container beneath my bed. Outdated tax forms, medical expenses, paperwork, remnants. I hadn't considered for years. I kept seeing my signature on FAFSA paperwork for Jason on hospital authorizations after Mom had her hip replaced as I was looking through a family folder. I had always filled things out and offered assistance, always have the ability to read the tiny print. Then something clicked. It was 3 years ago. Around that time, Jason began looking for a home with his girlfriend Vera. I recalled them discussing it over Thanksgiving. Mom said, "The market is brutal," Jason remarked. "We'll find a solution. Family always does." I assumed at the time that she meant they would lend him some funds or perhaps assist with a down payment. Back then, the statement "family always does" seemed giving. It felt like a weapon. Now I took no immediate action. I was unable to. I spent hours sitting in quiet. I gazed at my laptop without opening it, like time passing. I observed dust moving across sunshine. Everything was harsh and slow. I gave my mom a call that evening. On the second ring, she answered, as brilliant as ever. "My dear, I dropped off a pot roast. Did you get it?" "Thank you," I said. "Hello." Brief inquiry. "Why does Liberty National Bank have a mortgage in my name?" Quiet. Just enough time to raise suspicions. "Oh, that?" As if she had been waiting for this, her voice came back in. "It's only paperwork. Jason needs some assistance in order to qualify. I take it you weren't doing anything major with your credit." I sat up upright. "You used my name when you signed for a property. You're not really purchasing anything, and he needed it badly. He has been working so hard. You know, I couldn't decide whether to chuck my phone or laugh. The point isn't that. I wasn't even informed." With that tone of disdain, she replied, "You always overreact. I hadn't missed it. Jason is worthy of a future. He's under a lot of strain, you know. We assumed you would comprehend. It's you who has always maintained composure." I was hardly able to talk. "Do you believe he should have a home in my name?" "Look, sweetheart." She let out a sigh. "You have no family at all. Jason gets started. This is more important to him than to you." It was quite informal, as if she had just borrowed a garment and neglected to return it. She wasn't upset. She didn't feel embarrassed. In her view, at least, she was logical. I didn't say anything else before hanging up. I couldn't have said anything to get her attention. I didn't get any sleep that night. My eyes were wide open as I lay in bed watching the ceiling spin slowly like a carousel. I had a fresh taste in my tongue with every remembrance of assisting acrid and metallic utilized Jason's vehicle wrecked when I was 15. When I damaged a fender, Dad said it was the weather. After 2 years, I was informed that unless I spent every penny fixing it myself, I would never be able to drive again. When I received a scholarship to come meet you, Jason left community college twice. Boulder's mother stated, "Don't boast. He is sensitive. I worked while I was in school. I made early student loan payments." Jason always had the newest iPhone, but he was only able to work for 6 months at a time. He was always rescued by someone, including me. It was me who had nothing to need. The one they referred to as independent. The person who heard that "you're really strong." However, I was beginning to understand that strength was simply a code for survival. Whatever we do to you, I shut down my laptop without sobbing or screaming. There was a silence about me that I had never experienced before. Not calm, not peace. There was only a stillness so thick it was like gravity. They had used my name as if it were their own. Maybe because to them it did, but that was about to change. I didn't need an alarm. My eyes opened before the sun had fully crested over the neighboring rooftops. The room felt heavy, like the kind of silence that settles after something important is cracked. I pushed off the blanket and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor to the file cabinet I kept tucked beside my desk. It was an old metal thing I'd bought secondhand, back when I thought organizing my life in folders would somehow give me control over it. I started pulling files, school forms, tax returns, medical consents, all the documents that had ever needed my signature over the past 10 years. Some still smelled faintly of printer toner. Next, I opened the email from Liberty National. The PDF loaded sluggish. I studied the small spinning emblem like it may flicker out of existence if I stared too intently. When it eventually showed, I zeroed closely on the signature line. It looked like mine at first look, the arc of the O, the tail on the A, but then I spotted the R and Hartwell. It didn't dip. Mine always drops. And the Y had a curl that wasn't mine. Whoever did this, they had practiced. Studied. I nearly had to respect the effort until I noticed the notary stamp. That's what made my stomach drop. The notary wasn't a stranger. It was a classmate of mine from high school, Chelsea Bertram. Although we weren't close, we had laughed awkwardly together in exercise class and shared a locker wall. I recalled that she had obtained a certification in an administrative field, stayed in Denver after graduating, and had a little child. I didn't inquire. I got my phone out and looked up her name on Facebook. In a matter of seconds, I found her profile. She still uses the same picture of her holding a balloon and having her hair pulled back in a bun from her baby's first birthday. A message was sent to her. This is Odell Hartwell. Hello, Chelsea. Just a quick query. Have you notarized a Liberty National Bank mortgage paperwork? In my name some years back. My phone rang an hour later, but I wasn't expecting a prompt response. Hello, Odell. Yes, I did. Mom said, you couldn't come in because you were unwell. Said that it was urgent. I didn't hesitate. She seemed quite distressed. I apologize if I did something incorrectly. After reading it twice, I read it 3 times. I felt as though I had dipped my fingers in ice. She didn't mean to offend, Chelsea had believed, but she was unaware of it, Mom. The woman who once reprimanded me for not doing my dishes quickly was someone I believed. She claimed that I was too ill to sign my own mortgage, as if I were only useful documentation and not a real adult. My apartment's air felt thinner, leaning out a few vehicles beyond a dog walker. I went to the window and cracked it open. The world continued on as if nothing had occurred. But it had. There was a snap. I was still seated at the kitchen table at about 2:30 p.m. when someone knocked on the door. I took a while to relocate. I had no expectations. When I opened it, the knock was stronger than before. Standing on the doorstep was a man wearing a luminous vest. I have a clipboard. A tow vehicle sat at the curb behind him. Good afternoon, ma'am. Our goal is to retrieve the 2020 Honda Civic. The payments are 90 days past due. Odell Hartwell is the name. That's right. I blinked. My name is that? Sure, but I didn't purchase that vehicle. He leaned the clipboard in my direction. My birthday. My entire name, my line of credit. That's me for sure. I never signed anything for a Civic. I added gentler now. My father gave me that automobile as a gift. He gave a shrug. Still using your name? We have the right to reclaim. As he approached the car, I went outside. More than it should have, the air hurt. I saw him crank the tow cable tight after looping it under the front axle. Some neighbors looked out from behind their blinds. One of them even ventured just far enough onto their doorstep to appear worried, without uttering a single word. I refrained from arguing. How would I have responded? As the Civic pulled away, I took a seat on the front step and allowed the chilly concrete to press into the backs of my legs. I came to see that it was more than simply Chelsea's message, the automobile, or even the mortgage. It was all of it. I covered the food for Jason's graduation celebration because he had had a difficult year, when Jason was unable to pay the rent. Mom used my tax return to hang on to it, and he never returned it. The birthday card was the one that addressed our trustworthy one. You make things work. Accurate translation. It's you who will suffer the most, and you'll be happy about it. I returned inside. My intellect was sharper than it had been in days, yet my fingers were numb. I opened my top drawer and took out a yellow legal pad I used, all capitals. When I wrote instances when my identify has been used without authorization, I then highlighted it once and again, because I was tired of being silent and now had a list to create. Like it was holding its breath for me, the legal pad rested on my lap. 5 entries. My name was used as a spare key 5 times. They never came back. I turned the page and then turned it back. I wasn't finished. Not quite yet. I underlined the final word I had written, hospital, with the side of my pen while I stared at it. Not neatly under pressure. Something I hadn't looked at in months was pulled by that word. It frightened me, not because I forgot. I ended up in the emergency room 6 months ago. A response to shellfish. A mistake made by someone at a catered work event. The ambulance ride came back to me because my throat had closed up so quickly. In flashes only. For more than 12 hours, I had been unconscious. My mother was the only guest mentioned while I was there, and I dismissed it as consoling. Mom would be there, of course, but I couldn't help but wonder what she had been up to during those hours when I was immobile. Unable to sign, unable to talk. In order to access my old email, I opened my laptop and scrolled to the dates surrounding the incident. Finding it didn't take long. Well done. Your application for a Liberty National mortgage has been accepted. 3:11 p.m. timestamp. I opened it by clicking. Go over it again and again, all afternoon long. I was unconscious. I was aware of that. I didn't wish to make assumptions. I was looking for evidence. I called the hospital the following day. I pretended to be merely organizing my medical records. I spoke to a woman named Trina in records after being passed from department to department. Could you verify who signed my ER intake paperwork? Return in October. After a moment, there was some clicking on the keyboard. It appears to have been a family member. A lady named Patrice Hartwell was listed. Mom. I understand. Do you chance to have film of my room or timestamps for when I was admitted? Trina was quiet for a minute, then she said quietly, You were taken in at 2:12. Nurse records show you were unconscious by 2:29. There's a hallway camera we can grab to confirm. She phoned me back 2 hours later. Her voice had a distinct tone. The tape shows your mother entering your room at 2:47 p.m. You're plainly unconscious. I'm sorry if this is upsetting. However, you don't move the entire tape and the mortgage signature was time-stamped. 3:11. I stated she didn't react, she was not required to. I ended the call. For the first time, I sat down carefully and allowed my hands drop into my lap. I refrained from crying, I refrained from screaming. All I could do was watch the weight fall on me. The safest version of me for them to take advantage of was a signature that was forged while I was mute, quiet. I almost forgot. I had booked a storage unit, so I drove out to the outside of Denver that weekend. Since moving flats 2 years ago, I hadn't returned. Everything was covered in a thin coating of dust, and the air was stale and dry. There were many items there that I hadn't had the courage to discard: family records, birthday cards from occasions when I didn't feel honored. My dad even demanded that we save the boxes from Thanksgiving ornaments. I opened one marked Thanksgiving 2022 and found a picture frame nestled between a porcelain pumpkin and a long-dead candle. I recalled it. That year it had been on the buffet table next to the depressing cranberry sauce and the cornbread stuffing. Nobody is 8. As the Hartwell family, my dad had proudly exhibited it. My parents, brother Jason, and his girlfriend were seen in front of our house in the picture inside. It didn't include me. I blinked that day. I had been there. To get that supper, I had driven 3 hours. Mom said that not everyone enjoys chocolate, so I even packed dessert, which included lemon bars and pecan pie. After more investigation, I discovered an envelope containing original photo prints that were still in the drugstore's glossy wrapper. I took it out. We were there, every one of us. I was one of them. With one arm slung over Jason's shoulder, I stood directly between my parents. I was dressed in my favorite fall sweater, which was burnt orange. I had been cut out. Not in a symbolic sense, literally. They removed me from the picture. The package was still open in my lap when I sat down firmly on the concrete floor. Above the bright light bulb flashed time and again. They had done more than simply sign my name. They had begun to remove me from records, judgments, and memories. I wasn't only the fallback option. The unseen one was me. I held both pictures side by side, one with me and one without. My hands remained steady no more. I was removed from the photo by you, I muttered. I'll write one now. Erasing is impossible. I took a while to text her. I held the cropped photo like it was radioactive and looked at it for hours that night. I listened to both versions side by side on my desk the next morning. Me in, me out, and I snapped a photo. After that, I opened a text message that I hadn't seen in weeks. I'll attend the dinner on Sunday. I only wrote that I put the original picture in my purse's side pocket, zipped it up, and didn't look at it again until the weekend. It was chilly on Sunday. Everything felt sterile, that kind of late winter cold. It was well after 5 o'clock when I arrived to my parents' centennial home. In the driveway was the identical gray automobile, the porch light clinking against the same wind chime. It smelled like roast steak and lemon-scented floor cleanser inside. It was all too bright, too gleaming. Maris. As if I hadn't been silent for a week and a half, my mother opened the door. Observe who chose to accompany us. As though I were a visitor, she chirped. Not the mother whose life they were tearing apart piece by piece. Not her daughter. My father grunted something that hardly amounted to recognition. Harlan? Ronan. My brother was in the kitchen already. He poured wine as if he owned the establishment. His fiancée Vera appeared behind him wearing a white sundress with flowers, eyes shining, lips glossy. She pulled out the moniker and said, "Odell, I'm very happy you came. All we were discussing was the wedding food. Hold on until the Pinterest board appears." Nobody inquired about my well-being. Nobody brought up the mortgage. Nobody said that my credit would be ruined or that my car would be repossessed. We took a seat at the long wood table for supper. It was a dry roast. There was too much butter on the potatoes. In that phony manner when the food is hot but the conversation is frigid, everything seemed ideal. Maris jokingly mentioned seating charts. Ronan's laughter was too loud. Vieira distributed her phone, which was loaded with pictures of cake ideas and table arrangements. I chewed carefully, not hearing anything as I watched their lips move. I cleared my throat a few minutes later. Have they sent out the invitations? Vera blinked. Naturally. Have you not received yours? I took the envelope out of my handbag and set it next to my plate. All of them gazed at the front. A clean white card with gold wording with Ronan and guest inside. RSVP guidelines. Venue info. It didn't mention my name anywhere. A tailored invitation was sent to Ronan's girlfriend. His sister received preferential treatment. Maris chuckled tightly. The noise was too loud for the quiet. It must have been a mix-up, honey. You are aware of your invitation. Vera had to. Vera reddened, but remained silent. I remained silent. I just picked up the envelope, folded the flap, and put it back in my bag, like stale, stifling cigarette smoke. Silence hovered in the room. At last, Harlan leaned forward while holding his fork. Odelia, we're all just trying to go on with our lives. You have too much on your mind. It's unhealthy. I cautiously raised my head to meet his gaze. Are you even aware of what has been added to my name? He moved around in his chair. Maris looked down. Vera stopped. Not in my opinion. I briefly feared that someone could finally lose it. Perhaps a human word may confess something genuine. However, no. More wine was poured by Ronan. I got up and pulled my chair back with the gentle scratch of wood on tile when Maris asked if I wanted dessert. I said, "Thanks for dinner." I spoke in a cool, collected tone. At least be considerate enough not to mail it the next time you decide to write me a letter. When I left, I didn't slam the door. I felt something change inside of me, but I didn't raise my voice and I wasn't going to ignore it this time. When I walked away from the dinner table, I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. The quiet. Behind me was plenty. I kicked off my shoes as soon as I arrived home. I unlocked my phone and sat on the edge of my bed. A few weeks ago, while Vera was still acting like she liked me, she emailed me a link to a Pinterest page. It loaded slowly when I clicked it. Langford Maddox. Marriage hashtags like everlasting Langford. Gold accents, soft pinks, and Maddox at the end. I looked through the gift registry, bridesmaid outfits, table settings, and finally, the family moments section. Not a single picture included me. Not one. I believed I had shattered the phone's screen as my palm became tighter around it. Vera sent me a casual text message 2 days later. As if nothing had occurred. Would you want to get coffee? Only us, not a drama. Promise. After a long while of staring at the computer, I responded back. Yes. A little cafe. 2 blocks from my flat is where we first met. I arrived early, choose a table close to the rear. Vera was late by 10 minutes, as flawless as ever, with flawless curls and a subtle scent that exuded well-thought-out effort. She grinned as if it were breakfast. I appreciate you coming. I wanted to make everything clear. I gave a nod but remained silent. Despite not adding anything to her tea, she sat across from me and stirred it. You're going through a lot. I realize that. How stressful all of this has been is beyond me. But you know, Odelia, this is Ronan's moment. He sincerely cares that everything happens without a hitch. I could detect the salt behind her sugar-coated tone. I only hope, she murmured, raising her large, phony, worried eyes to me. The wedding won't be a scene because of you, your parents especially. Your mother would be very saddened by it. After you were finished, I blinked after staring at her for a long moment. She laughed breathlessly. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I am aware I waited for a moment before she moved. She stated she had to see a florist after finishing her tea too soon. We skipped the farewell hug. I had trouble sleeping that night. Her voice kept replaying in my head. It's Ronan's turn. Keep your parents happy. After getting up, I opened my old text folder and switched on the lamp. I hadn't looked through it in a long time. They are caught between a mountain of health insurance papers and W-2s. Was 1090-80. Ronan's college tuition statement from when we were all struggling to make ends meet during the recession. Now I could recall it well. He had required assistance and I had some remaining financial aid. A check had been issued straight to the student's account. It felt right at the time. Family was helpful. Family. We attended my mother's birthday dinner a few years later. It was Ronan who spoke. He always enjoyed giving speeches in which he expressed gratitude to our parents for giving up everything so that he could graduate debt-free. No one mentioned me, nothing. With that recollection crushing down on my chest, I sat down on my floor and waited. Money, the wedding, and the mortgage weren't the only factors. Every time they removed something from me, it was that time identity credit and made me feel self-centered for observing. I took out the yellow legal pad, inserted 2 additional bullet points, and flicked past the earlier notes. Paid the tuition for Ronan. Not acknowledged Vera, caution. Manipulation of emotions in the sake of maintaining unity within the family. After that, I looked at the page for a while. I didn't weep. Even if the words were a little hazy. In all capitals, I picked up a new sheet at the top. Wedding day is what I wrote. I put a strong line underneath it. They assume that because I'm silent, I won't do anything. I had been listening, but I whispered. Observing, recalling. They were also unprepared for the next step. The night I circled the wedding day, I didn't sleep. I was walking a tightrope. It only takes one thought to shatter. I sat on the floor surrounded by documents, files, screenshots, and that yellow legal pad while the morning light trickled through the blinds. Then there was a ping. I hadn't spoken to Clarice in years, but she sent me a direct message. Together we had studied political science at CU Boulder. She didn't say much. Hello, is this TikTok your name? I immediately thought of you. I click on the link. A drone shot swooping down on a freshly painted suburban home with cream exterior, black trim, and a broad smiling porch opened the film, which was accompanied by lively music. Vera's voice sounded bright and syrupy. Finally, we closed on the house of our dreams. We are grateful to everyone who had faith in us. I paused the frame. It was there. The address. I didn't have to make sure. Since it was still in my name, I knew it by heart. I got up too fast and knocked the pad over. My knees gave out. My breathing became labored. The deed I printed from the Liberty National Bank homepage was in the folder, so I fumbled through it and placed it next to my laptop. Odelia Hartwell is the mortgage holder. Not even the title had been transferred. I watched the video again and read the comments this time. This identical home vibe is manifesting in a couple of aims. You guys got the door paint from where? They were leveraging my online influence to get likes and acclaim. Their platform. Their leverage was my name, and I'd been the silent one long enough. By midday, I was pacing my apartment with the windows shut, the air stagnant and warm. I texted Sloan, a buddy from back when I did temp admin jobs. She was now a legal analyst with a mid-sized Denver business. Could I visit today? Her response. Naturally. Are you all right? I said yes, but I wasn't. After an hour, I was seated across from her in a drab conference room that had the scent of ambition and toner. My file appeared on Sloan's screen. She knitted her brow. Yes, Della. You have 5 outstanding debts that are in your name, 3 of which are connected to accounts or properties that aren't used by the main users. She bent over. It's not a coincidence. This appears to be patterned, even if your family is the only one involved. I felt sick to my stomach, a trend. Just above a whisper, I inquired. She described it as a plan. This might be viewed by a class action attorney as a purposeful framework for identity exploitation. Not all you are is a victim. They have been using you as their mechanism, like a freight train mechanism. The term struck me. To them, I was not a person. A credit score was me. I can recommend a specialist to you, Sloan added. She is harsh and deals with situations of familial deception. I gave a nod. Every item that was reported and every questionable overlap was printed down by her. Back at home, I gathered the papers like armor. I opened a new browser window, spread the documents on my bed, and entered Bank Fraud Division Liberty, National Report. Identity abuse. I hovered over the subject line, clicked the form, and uploaded my supporting documents. After that, I suspected fake ownership, typed urgent mortgage dispute, and pushed submit. The response arrived just before dawn. We have launched an inquiry. Please provide identification that has been notarized. I read it 3 times. However, something that had been tight inside of me for weeks finally relaxed. I wasn't shouting into space for once. There was a listener. An official, perhaps? I shut off my laptop and gazed at the ceiling for a while, allowing myself to experience it, moving real. Perhaps, but little. I was outside the downtown office at 9 in the morning. Lowry, Kessler, and Browner had been referenced by Sloan. The nameplate on the glass entrance glittered inside the ancient brick structure with steel-framed windows. I was greeted by the aroma of citrus cleanser and copier ink. 10 minutes after I submitted my name, I was seated across from Mr. Clay Browner, a guy with a voice like sandpaper and weary eyes. Without a word, he glanced through the folders I brought. He sometimes murmured something: recurring patterns in conduct, misuse of power of attorney, fraud inside the family. "You're not the first Hartwell I've seen," he replied bluntly after giving me a quick glance. In the past 7 years, that name has been connected to 3 instances. All of them were quiet communities. Hartwell. I blinked. He gave a nod. Family have faith mistreatment. It's more prevalent than most people realize, particularly with golden child relationships and strong control parents. It can be classified under organized fraud legislation after it is adequately recorded. Are you implying that they have already done this? Not when it comes to mortgages? No, he said, shutting the file. However, with medical debt, business loans, and even auto titles. Your situation. It has teeth. I felt taller as I made my way back to the parking lot. Not secure, not quite yet, but rooted. I heard my name being called from behind me. At that moment, I neatly twisted the hair of a woman wearing a navy jacket moved forward. Her eyes were familiar to me, but not her face. Back while we were still talking, I had already seen them in pictures on Ronan's phone. It came together, Soraya. In response to my silence, she remarked, "His ex is me." Naturally. She wasted no time. He leased an automobile under my identity, said that it was only transitory. Also had a loan authorized. The address on the documents was revealed to me when a collector contacted your parents' home, Drive Maddox. I gazed at the document. She gave me a 5-year-old debt statement. I wasn't surprised. I just made sure everyone believes Ronan, even if I attempted to tell them. So endearing. He spins everything like it's nothing, she said. Silences you by gaslighting you. I had an odd rush. Not yet. Not with rage. More like contentment. Verification. The narrative that I had been living in solitude was no longer exclusive to me. Thank you, I said. You won't believe how much this helps. After giving me a nod, she lightly caressed my arm. You're not insane. I gave Sloan a call later that day and left a message. We have a witness that supports our claims. Soraya is her name. She has documents. I then made a call to my house. Dinner time was nearly here. They would be at the table, I knew. Avoiding one other's gaze, they pass roles. It was Mary who answered after the 3rd ring. I said, "Hello, Mom." I spoke in a calm, measured tone. "Oh, Odelia." She spoke in a clipped tone. "You ought to advise Ronan to get legal counsel." Then silence. "Are you putting your own family at danger?" "No," I responded coolly. "I'm making predictions." After completing a frozen lasagna that I hardly tasted. Click that night. To retrieve something from my car, I walked downstairs. It took me a moment to see the glass. It's too late. The sharp confetti of dazzling shards scattered on the sidewalk. Someone had smashed in my driver's side window. I remained still. It was no longer even startling, so I simply looked. Next up. A sticky note gently fluttered against the gearbox. The writing was sloppy and nearly juvenile. Take a step back. It was not picked up by me. After locking my door and going upstairs, I sat down at my desk, opened a new document, and began to write down everything. The sight of the glass did not make me wince. I didn't have to. I had already come to terms with the fact that they might do worse. Rather, I took a photo of the broken window. Next came the menacing message that was put on my passenger seat. Both were forwarded to Sloan. My message was brief. They got more intense. Let's move forward. That morning, the air was crisp. It is the type of cold that awakens you without your consent. I drove to the downtown legal mediation after putting on my heavy coat. My window has been temporarily repaired using duct tape and transparent plastic. The voice in my brain sounded a lot like the fluttering, screeching sound it produced unrelenting. A white-walled conference room with polished flooring and coffee cups arranged in neat rows, as if none of us were there to wreck someone else's life. Was too bright to maintain inside the hearing room. However, it was the problem mine had already been damaged by them. Sitting across the table clothed, as if the strain hadn't yet penetrated their pores, were Ronan and Vera. Vera smiled tightly at me. Ronan didn't even glance at me. The representative for Liberty National cleared his throat. We're here to examine the property-related mortgage dispute. Juniper Hill, Lane 731. I composedly laid out the hospital timestamps, the notarized affidavit, and my signature overlays on previous legal documents. My voice cracked like a virus as each slide I clicked through struck like a silent gavel. We believed she had given her consent. We believed she was aware. The HOA board remained steadfast until the investigation was finished. Due to legal liability, your renovation permits have been suspended and you have 30 days to leave the property. The back of Ronan's chair scraped. This is absurd. It's us who make that place better. You used money that wasn't yours to turn it. I looked him square in the eye as I spoke. By evening, I was back in my apartment when I heard the knock. I knew it before I opened the door. It was Maris. Her eyes looked heavier than I remembered, her hands trembling as she clutched the hem of her cardigan. She didn't ask to come in. She just stood there on my welcome mat like a ghost who didn't know she died. We just wanted Ronan to have a future, she whispered. You were always fine, Odelia. No, I said evenly. I was always invisible. There is a distinction. I handed her a sealed envelope, copies of the debt reports, the forensic signature analysis, and a timeline of every theft under my name. You'll need this, I said. The law's coming next. She nodded once but didn't argue. She looked older, like all the denial had finally sunk through her skin. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. Later that night, I opened a cedar box from my childhood closet, the one I used to hide birthday cards and drawings inside. Beneath folded construction paper was a yellowed envelope I'd never opened before. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandma. My breath caught. Inside the letter was simple, but the words hit with the weight of every quiet moment I'd ever swallowed. They did this to me too. Once your mother and her sister. Don't let them define you. Darling, take your name back. I read it 3 times before I set it down. I stood at the window, Denver's skyline glowing faintly against the night. I felt still centered, not triumphant, not bitter, just ready. You used my name like it belonged to you, I whispered, but I reclaimed it. My phone buzzed beside me. Court clerk, subject line filing, acceptable. You will be advised of your hearing date. I grinned. Not because I won, but because I finally showed up for me. The courtroom was silent. Quiet, in the way. Only locations loaded with judgment may be. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table. Hands folded, breath steady. Across the aisle stood a man in a gray suit representing Ronan and Vera. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, just paperwork and silence. Mr. Browner. My attorney leaned in and slid a single page toward me. You don't have to speak, Odelia, but if you do, make it count. I nodded, but I already knew I wasn't going to say a word. The judge. A woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a voice like slate red. The decision clearly without drama. The mortgage was voided. My name cleared, credit restitution ordered in full. Then she made an unexpected addition. A pattern of coercive financial abuse within the family structure is acknowledged by this court. This is a formal warning to Maris Maddox and Harlan Maddox. There will be civil penalties for any additional involvement in their children's financial affairs. Behind me, I heard a shift. I headed for the courthouse steps without looking out. Maris was sitting by herself on a bench. When I noticed her, her hands were clenched tightly on her lap and her back was straight. When I went by, she didn't look up. I didn't stop. Back home, I packed quietly. It didn't take long. Just a few boxes of what I actually needed, what actually mattered. I wasn't running, I was stepping away cleanly, deliberately. Before leaving, I took the original family photo, the one they'd cropped me out of, and slid it into an envelope. I taped it to my front door. No note, no signature. Just that image, whole and untouched. Let them decide what it meant. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a small wooden booth at a weekend artisan market in Boulder. My hands smelled like clay and lavender oil. I'd started throwing pottery again. The mugs were a little lopsided, the glaze a bit too thick, but people smiled when they picked them up. A woman with gray streaked hair held one in her hand. The side read reclamation. She asked why that word? I smiled because it wasn't supposed to exist. But it does. She bought 2 that night. Back at my apartment, I made tea and stepped out onto the small balcony that overlooked a quiet alley. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one else's name was on the lease, no one else's fingerprints on my choices. I watched the steam rise from the cup. No phone calls, no guilt, no one telling me to be the bigger person. Nothing but quiet, but not the kind that eats at you, the kind that heals. They had used my name like it belonged to them. They signed, borrowed, erased. Believing I'd never make a sound, but I didn't need noise to be heard. I walked away. No screaming, no threat, nothing but quiet. Silence they couldn't ignore.